All right, guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be diving into the Security Plus Audits and Assessments PowerPoint. So these processes themselves are going to be fundamental on understanding if your organization's security posture are working. And if they aren't, where are improvements needed? Now, what exactly is an audit and assessment? We are going to be here to help organizations evaluate the effectiveness of their security controls. We need to identify all of those weaknesses, i.e., the vulnerabilities, and we need to ensure that the compliance meet with industry standard regulations. Now, that's not the end of it. We also need to make sure that they meet our internal policies as well. Now, essentially, what we're talking about here is we're trying to find a structured way to examine and judge our security posture. How well are we doing as a company as a whole? So, what are the differences? What's very important for us to understand, while often they're used together, audits and assessments, they are not exactly the same. An assessment is generally a broader term. This is going to be focused on evaluating our risks, identifying those vulnerabilities, and understanding the current security landscape of our environment. Think of it like the security posture. Now, this is going to be the comprehensive checkup. That's what assessments are. Now, an audit, on the other hand, is typically a more formal, structured, often focused on some kind of compliance. Okay? This is going to be some kind of specific standard, regulation, or even policy. Think of it like checking if a specific rule is being followed correctly. Audits often result in either a pass or fail, or a formal report against the established criteria. Now, organizations themselves are not going to just rely on outsiders, because if we do that, well, we probably will still get gaps within our security. So we're also going to perform what we like to call internal evaluations. So let's look at the internal assessments themselves. Now, the primary goal of these internal assessments are going to be, for one, we want to identify vulnerabilities. We want to proactively find all the weaknesses before the attackers do. We then want to evaluate whether our security controls themselves. We need to determine whether or not the safeguards we put in place against fraud in accounting, like the firewalls, access controls, or even antiviruses, are actually working. We need to ensure compliance. We need to check the adherence to internal company policies and prepare for any external regulatory audits. And then lastly, we need to prepare for threats. We want to understand the organization's readiness to face the current and emerging cyber threat. Now, these steps typically are going to involve things like scope, gathering evidence through scans, interviews, and documentations. It's going to also be in analyzing the evidence, finding the reports, and following up on remediation efforts. These types of internal assessments can form from a wide variety of vulnerability scans to specific policy reviews against whatever security framework our company is currently using. Okay. Now, there are going to be a couple of other internal types of checks. Sorry, this slide is making me laugh. For one, we're going to be checking on those weaknesses. Then we're going to take the risks that are assigned to those weaknesses. And then we're going to try to do something on the offensive. We're going to go to the penetration test side. This is where we're going to then try to fix what we found as a weakness and validate that it's truly a weakness. Now, external audits and assessments, on the other hand, are also going to be valuable for our organizations, because this is where we're going to be able to bring in outside experts. So what does this involve with our third parties? Well, there's several key reasons why we want in a third party versus just internal auditing. For one, is compliance. Many regulations like PCI DSS, HIPAA, or even SOX compliance are going to require external audits to prove compliance. It's a requirement to stand underneath the framework of whatever compliance framework that we're looking at. Now, an external audit also is going to bring an unbiased perspective. They're not influenced by internal politics or anything like that. What they're trying to do is they're just trying to provide a objective evaluation of how are we doing. There's no bias here. And then lastly, external auditors often bring broad industry experience and can provide more valuable recommendations for strengthening our cybersecurity program because they know what's best for best practices because they've seen it elsewhere. The process usually involves defining the scope to the external party, and then the audit and the assessment itself, and then we're going to go to a final report, and then often we'll have them come back and do a validation that we actually completed what they thought we were supposed to. Now, there are different parts of the process here. Just like in internal, we want to prepare and plan. We want to do some data collection. They need to figure out, well, what do we have? They need to analyze that. These are those internal security reports or even some of those pen testing reporting. Then they're going to build up that report and then follow up with their remediation. So whether or not you're doing this internally or externally, if you haven't noticed, it's about the same process that we're going to follow. So some of the external ones, again, compliance audits. Now, these type of audits could just be, well, is it just for PCI or DSS? Is it a broader look? Those just plain old security audits. How are we doing with our security posture? And not every time, but sometimes we'll hire them as pen testers to test our defenses to make sure that they are working properly. So let's focus on pen testing. As defined, it means involved in simulating real-world cyber attacks on an organization, system, networks, or application to identify vulnerabilities and or weaknesses. It's essentially ethical hacking. They're going to try to break in, with permission, find holes before those malicious actors do. So what is the purpose of pen testing? Well, it's just exactly that. We're trying to find those weaknesses. So we're going to identify exploitable weaknesses. We're going to find all those vulnerabilities that could be used against us if an attacker finds them first. We're going to evaluate all of our defense mechanisms. We're going to see that our firewalls or intrusion detection systems are able to detect or block the simulated attacks themselves. We're going to then try to understand the real-world consequences if a vulnerability were exploited. We're going to demonstrate that our security measures required by regulations are effective, and i.e. we're going to ensure compliance. And then we're going to prove actionable results in finding those weaknesses. So there are different types of security pen testing. It doesn't have to be an all-inclusive, let's test all of our security. Sometimes we'll bring in pen testers for just certain pieces of our work. We might bring them in just to test our network. We might bring them in to say, hey, let's test only things that touch the web, so external attackers themselves. We might want to test our wireless penetration testing. In other words, can our neighbors see our wireless network, and is that going to make it weaker for our environment? Can someone get to inside our network by maybe hacking outside of the fence? We might test social engineering, like piggybacking and tailgating, social shoulder surfing, phishing attempts, all that. Or we may even try physical penetration. How far can an attacker, an unauthorized user, get inside of our facilities before they are detected? So that process there is all about defining the rules of engagement. So If you do take the Pen Plus exam later, you'll learn more in depth what all of this means. But for one, when you're hired to be an ethical hacker, there's going to be a rules of engagement contract. What are you allowed to do, and what's in and outside of scope? This is also going to provide you the objectives of what you need to complete for this scan. The next thing was they're going to then gather information about their target. Once they have a contract in place, they'll start reconnaissance. Once they've identified everything they could on the reconnaissance phase, they'll start touching the live systems, open ports, running services, and exploiting them. Once they have exploited, they'll attempt to establish a persistence, a foothold in the network, only if, of course, required by scope. Sometimes the rules of engagement does not allow this. Then they're going to analyze their findings, assess risk, provide remediation advice, and then finally they'll clean up all their tools, backdoors, user accounts left by the test itself. Now there are two different types of reconnaissance in the information gathering phase. The first one is called passive reconnaissance. This is all the information that is publicly available without directly interacting with their target. This is like searching websites, looking up DNS records, or even using social media. Or they'll go to an active recon where they directly probe the target network to gather information, like port scanning, network mapping, and this is going to carry more risk of detection. Now, after the technical work is done, the reporting phase is critical. Attestation of findings is the formal process that a pen tester tells everybody, well, what did they find? They're going to confirm that the vulnerabilities, the risks, the security gaps that have been identified during the test. It's basically the official documented proof of what they did and what was found. So why is it so important? Well, the final report provides validation. It's going to give us verified proof of all the weaknesses and vulnerabilities they found. It's going to then explain the potential business impact of what was discovered, how to fix it. They're going to give clear recommendations on how to fix the identified issues. And then it's going to serve as a formal document required by any compliance standards to make sure that, hey, was anything found? Was it fixed? And are they still within compliance? Okay. It's also going to then help the organizations decide, well, how do they prioritize which weaknesses to fix first? It's going to help them look at the risks and then fix whichever's first. So to wrap up, audits and assessments are a vital tool for any organization that's serious about cybersecurity. Whether or not we talk about internal or external audits, they're going to provide essential insights to provide effective security controls. They're going to help us identify all those vulnerabilities, the weaknesses before they are exploited, and ensure compliance. And we're going to use pen testing to find this type of an assessment to simulate those real attacks. We want to make sure that we test all our defenses under pressure. So security is a continuous process, and regular audits and assessments are key components of that life cycle. So we've covered the topics for this chapter, chapter 12. I'll see you for chapter 13.